welcome once again to another episode of SLMA Radio, brought to you on behalf of the entire Sales Lead Management Association that has to do with sales lead management. It probably starts here with the SLMA Radio Show. And the man who's put it all together keeps it alive and growing all the time. But he's not wearing his special Reagan hat today, so I don't know. Maybe he's not feeling it, but Jim Overmeyer. Hey, Jim.
Thank you, Paul. Paul is our announcer for all programs in the Funnel Radio channel. He's been my sidekick for 11 years on SLMA Radio and on the Funnel Radio channel. Today, our program title is Who Creates the Most Wealth, Sales or Marketing? And our guest is Mark Coronna. Mark is an area managing partner and CMO for Chief Outsiders. He is a globally experienced executive with a track record of consistent growth, turnaround, and repositioning expertise across multiple industries. And his passion is to help leadership teams accelerate revenue and profits. He's authored over 35 articles, 4 ebooks, topics such as account-based marketing, building compelling value propositions, and improving lead generation and qualification. I ran into Mark, introduced to Mark through Tom Judge from Direct Marketing Partners. They were on the SLMA radio program 2 weeks ago, and the subject was ABM use case, lessons from the front, and how it's impacting sales pipelines. Let's get into this, Mark. Who creates the most wealth, sales or marketing? But just before we do that, please explain to us who Chief Outsiders is.
Well, I'm happy to, Jim, and thanks for the opportunity to join you again today. Chief Outsiders is the largest firm of marketing executives in the U.S. There are 65 or 70 of us in strategic municipalities around the U.S. We've all been senior marketing executives in major operating companies. Probably the minimum experience of somebody within Chief Outsiders is 20 years of executive marketing leadership. And we're fractional executives or contract executives. So when companies need help with growth or with business strategy or with developing strategic marketing programs, they bring us in on a part-time to full-time basis for as long as it takes to get them oriented and get their programs solid and improving their fundamental marketing. That's kind of who we are and what we do.
So you're interim executives, and you'll come in from anything from a week to planning and tackle subjects to a couple of days a week for months. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we will do workshops and projects that are fairly short duration. But then I've got a client where I've been there 1 day a week, fractional CMO for about 6 years now. And I am the marketing department for that business, outsource all of the marketing programming to digital agencies and ABM agencies, and we run it very efficiently that way.
Do you help hire your replacement as a fractional CMO and find a CMO for the companies that you work for?
Yes, we do, because part of what we do is making the programs that we put in place sustainable. The intent is that we don't stay on forever, and that we help our companies implement better programs, better processes, improve their marketing platforms, and then, of course, bringing in the right people so that they can continue to drive forward is always part of an engagement.
Well, great. This gives people an idea that you've created a lot of marketing programs for many, many B2B clients, correct? It's B2B, not B2C?
Well, we actually work both B2B and B2C, and it's a pretty good mix within Chief Outsiders currently.
Excellent. And Chief Outsiders can be reached how?
ChiefOutsiders.com, and you'll find my profile on that website. And any of us are happy to talk to you.
Great. So the question is, who creates the most wealth, sales or marketing? Mark, the floor is yours.
All right. I thought when you asked me to speak about this with you, Jim, it was an interesting topic. Certainly, I think in the business world today, particularly with small, mid-sized businesses, but even with larger businesses, there's not a clear definition of what sales is or what marketing is. Just to give you a proof point on that one, probably the most downloaded article on the Chief Outsiders website was a blog that was written 5 or 6 years ago, I think. And the title was, "What's the Difference Between Sales and Marketing?" And so those of us who've been in the sales executive role and the marketing executive role, like I have, would certainly give you our opinion about that. But I think there's still some industry confusion about what does sales do and what does marketing do. Your question puts an added dimension to that, because what you're really saying is, I think, is who creates the most value for a business over time. Now I'm going to get all my sales friends to sort of call me up and threaten me, because I'm going to say it's really marketing, I believe, that does that. And I'd like to give you a little bit of perspective on why I think that's the case.
Please do. It's not a surprise, but it's become more and more true the last couple of years, I believe, that marketing has assumed the wealth generating position in the company. So have at it, and let's find out why you think this is true.
When I look at the sales role and the marketing role, I think about them in terms of impact on the business and time frame. As a sales executive, I was always concerned about this week's sales, this month's sales, this quarter, this year. And it was very hard for me to take a perspective beyond the immediate year, because you're so short-term focused in terms of driving the revenue and finding ways of improving the core business. And of course, every sales executive is looking for those incremental opportunities through new customer acquisition, through customer development, and nurturing programs. They're looking for the 5 or 10% year-over-year improvement in the core business. Some of the clients that I've been involved with brought me in because they said, we've been growing 5 or 10%, but we don't think that gives us enough cushion if there's an economic downturn. So we'd really like to be growing at 10 or 15% annually, so that when an economic downturn happens, which I think everybody believes it will, that we're in a great position. We don't have to lay anybody off. We've still got enough of a good, solid core business to keep going and last through that downturn effectively. And so what's wrong with that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, every business needs a good, strong core growth program. And I mean, marketing will support sales in that, of course. But I think when you look at the primary responsibility for core business growth, it's typically the sales organization that drives that. Now let me change the time perspective, because I said I think the difference emerges when you start to take a longer view of opportunities. A healthy business will be not just looking at short-term opportunities to improve its core, but will be taking a forward view of opportunities in the 1 to 2 year, 2 to 3 year, 3 to 5 year horizons. There's a model called Horizon Growth that does a very good job of laying out how you can actually develop new revenue and profit streams and layer them on top of one another. If you want to visualize it, think about a staircase. On the bottom floor, those are your core sales, and you're hoping to see some improvement in that. But in a year or two, you'd really like to see new revenue and profit streams adding to the core. And in 2 or 3 years, maybe layering other revenue and profit streams on top of those. And then when you go out to 3 to 5 years, you'd like to see additional new revenue and profit streams layering on top of the 2 horizon streams plus the core business. And I think the argument for why marketing can drive more value is just this. I think it's a mathematical equation, honestly. Because if you say, okay, if I take the core business and grow at 10%, and I put a revenue multiple on that business, if I was going to value the business for sale or for any other reason, and play 10% out, you can see what it would look like in 3 years or 5 years. If you take that core business and continue to grow at 10%, and then start layering on top of that additional revenue and profit streams throughout that horizon period of 3 to 5 years, when you do the math on that multiple, you're going to come up with a much bigger number. I know there's many, many ways of valuing businesses. I think revenue cash flow is typically one of the ways that investors or anyone will look at sort of the valuation models. And so that's why I think that marketing honestly has the opportunity, because it's going to be marketing that drives those longer term opportunities. But there's an important catch to that conversation, Jim, and that is that marketing has to assume the mantle of growth champion in a business in order to be able to do that. And of course, that's not always the case.
So they have to assume the mantle of growth champion. Previous conversations, we talked about this a little bit. You mentioned an article from Booz that talked about this.
Yes, that article goes back, I think, to 2004, honestly. It really lays out 6 categories of marketing value adds to any businesses, or 6 roles the marketing team can play in the business. And the lowest level is a service provider role. And a service provider would be a marketing team or a marketing organization that does basic support for the business, runs the trade shows, manages the website, provides sales support material and good collateral, right? And, in a lot of businesses, that's when you say, well, tell me what your marketing group does. That's how they'll articulate the role of marketing in that business. If you're a marketing person, you're not awfully excited probably about being in that kind of an environment, but there are opportunities to create more value. You can become a brand builder, which helps the business grow. I mean, they provide much more richer marketing services. You can step up from that and become a best practice advisor, where they're helping business units maximize their individual marketing effectiveness. You can step up to a higher level of contribution or value add as a senior counselor, where they provide really advisory services on marketing strategy to the CEO and individual businesses. And then if you get up to the 5th level, a marketing master is just a solid operating group. They master the basic marketing services, brand management, provide guidance to other business leaders. But that's not the top. The top is really marketing as a growth champion. And in that role, the marketing organization takes responsibility for organic growth as well as growth through acquisition and other means, right? And so they really drive the strategic growth agenda for the business.
Very interesting. This is probably a good point to take a break here and hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, let's explore this marketing as a growth champion and talk about the organic growth and the acquisition. I always think of marketing as a wealth builder from the short-term perspective. They create the demand that drives the pipeline. And you're bringing a whole new dimension to this. We've been speaking with Mark Coronna. He's the area managing partner and CMO for Chief Outsiders. He's been addressing the topic, who creates the most wealth, sales and marketing. We'll be back in just a moment. Over to you, Paul.
And just a quick break to point out that Chief Outsiders is a national firm of 70-plus chief marketing officers, or CMOs. These CMOs work with businesses on a fractional basis. Each CMO joins the leadership team of their clients to solve growth challenges, provide strategy, implement ABM practices like we're talking about here, and revenue pipeline management. Chief Outsiders was awarded Forbes magazine's Small Giants Award for a top privately held company. So if you're looking for somebody to come in and join your organization immediately, you can't afford a full-time CMO, but you're looking for a part-time or fractional CMO, why not go to the best? ChiefOutsiders.com. Just like it sounds, ChiefOutsiders.com.
Thank you, Paul. It's nice to hear from our sponsors today. We're talking to Mark Coronna, CMO for Chief Outsiders. We've been tackling the subject, who creates the most wealth, sales or marketing? Mark is taking this discussion in a totally different direction to a great extent, because he's looking at this in a very long-term nature, and I think too short-term, and he's really given me some thoughts here. We're talking about this Booz Allen article that appeared 10 years ago or so. And he talked about laying out the 6 categories of value add that marketing brings in its ability to create wealth for companies. And Mark went through the service providers, the brand builders, the best practice advisors, senior counselors, and marketing masters. And then we got into the marketing as a growth champion, which includes the organic growth and acquisition. Were my notes good?
Well, yeah. And Jim, I think to kind of support your point around shorter term value, that Booz Allen article, I mean, if you have a marketing organization that's performing at that growth champion level, that Booz Allen study that was done actually identifies incremental value, tangible value from marketing functioning in a growth champion role. And so they've done the research on it and basically show that marketing departments that perform at a growth champion role outperform their peers by a double-digit amount. That's pretty substantial, right? Because if you're outperforming your peers double digits, your growth is going to be stronger, your profits will be stronger. And so even in the shortest term, I think your point was right. However, that's all about supporting the core business. I think when you start to layer on a horizon growth theme to that, and you look at the valuation you can have from incremental revenue and profit streams coming online over time, the jump in valuation is much more significant. So I kind of think of it as an and not an or, Jim. I mean, you still get the value in the short term from a high-performing marketing organization that's acting like a growth champion, but you also get the long-term valuation that comes from incremental revenue and opportunities.
You're really opening up my mind here today. I can see that being in some of those CMO and chief sales officer roles all those years, I was always looking at things from a short-term perspective because I knew I was only going to be there 3 to 6 months and I was fixing problems similar to what you did, but I wasn't looking at it from a long-term perspective. And you brought a whole new dimension to this. Expand a little bit more on this marketing as a growth champion. Give us some thoughts and examples of how you explain this to corporations.
I think it starts with rethinking the role of the marketing executive. That person needs to be viewed in a role of a contributor to the long-term growth of the business. And given the freedom and the flexibility and also the accountability to start to drive some of this horizon growth thinking and best practices. You know, there's some conversation within the marketing world today, Jim, about whether the title CMO should really be changed to CGO, right, or Chief Growth Officer. You know, it reminds me back in the compliance world I was in, my last corporate role, where chief compliance officers were told, gee, you better get risk in your title because risk is where the action is going to be. You know, it's that old sort of Wayne Gretzky, the reason I've been successful is I'm skating to where the puck is going rather than where it is. And so if you're a marketing executive, it seems like the puck is going towards becoming a CGO or at least acting more in a growth champion kind of role. To do that, you need to be very proactive. I don't think anybody's just going to hand that to you. I think a marketing executive needs to demonstrate interest, capability, and providing that level of strategic support to the organization. And then, of course, as they do that, they need to build out a team that can support that as well. Because there's a lot of attributes in people who like the new and different and forward thinking and new business opportunities and new market launches that's different, right? Those people have different attributes than a lot of people in marketing roles today. They tend to be more risk takers, more innovative, more willing to tolerate ambiguity. And so the part of your earlier question was, can you leave behind an organization that's equipped to take this on? And the answer is yes. But typically it starts with a senior marketing executive who really wants that growth champion assignment.
Well, that's really, it's very interesting. Years ago when I was a marketing manager at a company, I was walking down the hallway one day. Somebody said something as they passed. And I said, what was that, George? And he said, oh, it's your nickname. This is at the time, it was a big company, $500 million, 12 different divisions. And he said, it's just a nickname. I said, what's a nickname? He said, don't worry about it. He said, you probably won't like it. I said, come on, George. He said, well, they call you the mosquito. I said, the mosquito? It doesn't sound like it's very positive. He said, they call you the mosquito because no matter how many times they wave you away, you keep coming back.
Good, very good.
I said it was the best. It was the best nickname I have ever had because I would ask why. Why are we introducing these products? When are we going to introduce it? What's the quota? Should marketing should know the quota for all these products. All the marketing plans have to be based on the quotas that the salespeople have to produce. What's our long-term plan, not just the short-term plan? It used to drive people crazy. Very interesting. Can you give me any examples of some of the companies you've worked for that have thought this way?
Well, sure. Well, probably the first one was Deluxe Corporation, where I was hired to build a business incubator and a business accelerator. Deluxe was pretty smart about looking towards the forward view of where paper checks were going. And the executives there knew that they needed a plan B and a plan C and a plan D for the day when paper checks started to decrease in volume. And so I built a business accelerator incubator, really kind of honed my approach to horizon growth and business innovation in that assignment. I took it to U.S. Bank when I was there as a senior payment executive, launched a couple of new businesses. One actually, after 4 or 5 years, generated about $6 or $7 billion in incremental transaction volume to the bank. And then I took that model over to Wolters Kluwer Financial Services, where I helped launch that business into Europe, which was incremental revenue and profit streams. And so those are all three really good examples of how to actually apply this kind of thinking to a business. And then, by the way, those were large Fortune corporations, but this model works just as well for small and mid-sized businesses as it does for billion-dollar organizations.
Very interesting. We're coming to the end of our interview, which I hate to finish so quickly, but because there's so much to say on this subject. If there's a CEO listening to this show today, how do they find a CMO that wants to take risk, wants to be known as the creator of wealth in their company? How do they find someone like that?
I think the key is when you look at someone's resume, you can see all the good things that they've done along the way, all the expertise they've developed. What you need to do is you also need to think about what are the key attributes of somebody that you would want in this marketing leadership or growth champion role. And when you think about attributes, that's not something that a lot of employers develop very clear thinking around, right? But clearly you want people who can do the basics, the fundamentals, because that's part of marketing too. But you really want people who have a forward view, who are collaborators, who can look for opportunities, figure out which ones could be interesting and real to the business. They like situations where things aren't black or white, where there's opportunities to create more value. They've approached their jobs very differently.
Well, Mark, I hate to call it into our program today, but we're kind of at our 30-minute limit. How can someone reach you to talk about this subject a little more in depth?
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Mark, M-A-R-K. Coronna, C-O-R-O-N-N-A. You can find me at chiefoutsiders.com. My profile is also there. And if you go to LinkedIn, you can tap into a lot of the articles and ebooks. They're all free, and I'm happy to share them. But I'd also love your thoughts about if they were of value to you. How'd you use them, and what kind of impact did they have on your business?
Well, Mark, you've changed my thoughts about marketing as builders of wealth in a totally new direction. Thanks for tackling this subject, who creates the most wealth, sales or marketing? And I think hands down, it becomes marketing. Mark, you've been very generous with your time today. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for inviting me in, Jim. Really appreciate it. By the way, I had a nickname too. My nickname was I'm the Mark in Marketing. Well,
you're so the Mark in marketing that's created millions of dollars.
So it's a little different than mosquito, but that's okay. Whatever works, right?
Yep. Mark, thank you very much for coming in today. We hope to hear from you again.
Very well. Thanks, Jim. Cheers.
Don't hesitate, for everybody listening out there. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and Blueberry. And you can also, if you've got the Alexa app, you can add under skills, you can add SLMA Radio into that app and listen to our programs at any time on Alexa. Thank you very much. Paul, over to you.
Well, once again, you've been listening to another interesting episode from the SLMA Radio, brought to you by the Funnel Radio Network for at-work listeners like you.